Welcome to Podcasting Smarter, the podcast for podcasters by podcasters. Podcasting Smarter is the official podcast from Podbean, featuring podcasting interviews, best practices, and helpful tips. We're here to give you the tools, resources, product updates, and news to help you get started podcasting and keep your podcast growing.
Hello and welcome to Podcasting Smarter. This is Norma Jean Belenky, Podbean's head of events. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Podbean's podcast specialist, Roni Gosch, where we'll talk all about podcast episode chapters. That's chapters within each episode of your show that break down content and allow your listeners to get to the good stuff. Stay tuned, and here we go. Hi, Roni. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you doing today, Norma Jean?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm so excited to talk about chapters. I'm excited that we have chapters now at Podbean and everyone can add them into their episodes. So first off, tell us a little bit about the feature, and then we'll get into the benefits and some of the fun details.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the feature, basically it's going to be a process that you go through when you're uploading your episode, or if you want to go back into any of your previously published episodes, any of your back catalog, you can easily go in and edit any of your episodes to feature the chapters. And essentially what you're going to be doing is as you're recording, or maybe as you've gone back and listened to your episode, you can note specific points within your podcast where you might be shifting in topic, or maybe like where the interview starts, where a specific segment begins, and you can mark that timestamp. And as you edit or as you upload your episode, you can go into your settings. It's going to be something that's going to be on the right-hand side, right below the social share feature. And you can put in those timestamps and then name your individual chapters. And that's where you can say, hey, this is where the interview begins, or hey, this is where our game show segment begins. And you can add as many chapters as you want. And you can even add chapters for parts of the show that aren't even public. So for example, if your episode is 15 minutes long, you can accidentally add a chapter at minute 16:30, which I'm not saying I did, but I did by accident. And then once you save that, anybody who listens to your podcast through the Podbean app or through the Podbean browser site, such as your personal podcast website, our browser directory, they will have access to a specific menu that will pop up that will list all of the chapters available in that episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great way to direct people to specific pieces of content within your episodes. And that's great for your listeners because it changes their listening experience, but it's also really great for your podcast SEO, helping people find you and search and find specific content within your episodes that they're really excited about. So we've kind of gone over the benefits of chapters to your podcast episodes. Can you explain, in terms of adding the chapters, is it a simple process, Roni?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you do it when you upload your episode. It's a nice little line that pops up right there on the sidebar, right below all of the social share features. So as you're going through saying, hey, I want to push this to Twitter, I want to push this to Facebook, there's another line there that says add episode chapters. And you click on that and a new window will pop up where you can put in your timestamp and where you can name the individual chapter. Now, naming the chapters are going to follow similar rules to like naming your podcast episode. While you do have a wide expanse of space to name the chapter, you don't want to get too crazy with it because you don't want it disappearing off the edge. You don't want people to get bored halfway through. You really want to get short, sweet, and to the point with naming your chapter. You want to let people know exactly what's happening, what to expect. And if they're looking for something specific, you want to give them an idea of where that specific something is. So for example, if you split your show into segments where one is like a question and answer thing, one is a special preview of an interview, or you're covering news in your industry, you can mark industry news, guest interview, Q&A section, so people know where to go to get that content.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some links here in the show notes for this episode as well from our blog that just kind of outline how chapters work, how to implement them on your episode with visuals, because everybody's different. I mean, as podcast people, obviously we're audio people, but we do also have a lot of those visual aids here to make sure that you don't have any issues implementing chapters, because it really does benefit your show, right? People are able to find content that they want, whether it's an interview segment, whether it's a trivia segment, whether it's, hey, here's what we're going to talk about, specific tips and best practices about today's subject of the podcast. So it really is an incredible feature. And what we've also seen is that within show notes, it really helps add to the arc of the episode as well.
Absolutely. We like to highlight the fact that storytelling in your podcast, whether it's a fictional podcast where you're actually telling a story, or it's a podcast where you're covering information in an industry, you're reviewing games and books, every single piece of media is going to have some kind of beginning, middle, and end arc. And so by listing out everything that people can expect within your show notes and having the matching chapters within your podcast episode, you're really showing people the arc of what to expect. And believe it or not, that will actually get people more excited and more anticipatory of what to expect. So for example, if they know that you're doing, specific, Q&A thing or a specific trivia section, and they see that in the show notes, they're going to get really excited about that. You absolutely want to include that sort of thing within your show notes, within your chapters, so you can really get that excitement up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also something where we're talking about chapters for all podcast episodes. So any account that you have with Podbean, this is now a feature across the board that you're going to be able to access with your account. So any podcast that you have, you can add chapters. There's no specific guidelines in terms of which users. It's not a business feature. It's a feature across the board. So there's no requirements in terms of what kind of account you have with us. It's really a feature that we've released across all of our podcast accounts. So we're just so excited about this. And Roni, in terms of any limitations on displaying chapter information, especially for utilizers, especially for podcasters utilizing the website theme from Podbean's website, like you were saying, is there a maximum to what we can say in each chapter? Is there a maximum to the number of characters for the titles? Any specifics there?
As far as I'm aware, any character limitations within the chapters are going to mimic the same character limitations for your actual episode titles. So for the episode titles, I believe the character limit is 200 characters. We'll double check that. We'll link all of the related info in the show notes as well. And that's why we said when you name your chapters, you do want to be short, sweet, and to the point. You don't want it to trail off because, once it gets to a certain point, people only read a couple words and they'll say, okay, I'm going to skip this chapter. I'm going to skip the other chapter. You really want to let people know within, 5-10 words exactly what they can expect from each segment of your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to confirm, with Podbean, you do have 200 characters for your podcast title and 1,000 characters for your podcast description. So those are definitely some metrics that we'll have here in the show notes for you as well from our How to Start a Podcast Step-by-Step guide. And Roni, thank you so much for joining us. This is a very short, exciting episode today, launching a feature that we have just been ecstatic about rolling out here at Podbean. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And we'd love to hear how you guys are using features with your podcast. So as you're listening to this episode, go ahead and reach out to us on Twitter, on Facebook. Let us know how you're implementing chapters within your podcast, because we'd love to hear if you're, labeling, hey, this is where the interview starts. This is where a Q&A starts. This is where we have our game of the night. We want to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of our social links are here in the show notes. If you ever want to tag us here at Podbean, you know where to find us. Thanks, Roni. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Podcasting Smarter. If you have any podcasting questions or want to get in touch, send us an email at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Thanks so much and happy podcasting.